Hello, Gabrielle Celeste. Welcome back to another episode of my YouTube channel where I talk about all the things that I've learned along the way of building my spiritual business. I am the owner of AGUA Astrology and the co-host of the Spiritual Sisters podcast, and I am documenting my journey building up my spiritual business, which has been around for the last 3 years, and I just capitalize and capture on all the things that I've learned along the way, whether it's from readings, from podcasting, from my own personal growth journey, and so forth. And today I was going to talk about what I learned from doing 30 days straight of breath work during the month of April of 2025. So I had gotten the idea from my girlfriend, Lindsay Walker, of the Oh My God, You're Glowing podcast about a year ago. And I just couldn't commit to it until now, honestly, literally a year later. She became certified as a breathwork facilitator, and she mentioned that part of her certification process was completing 30 days straight of breathwork. And she had mentioned that if she skipped a day, she'd have to start all over again. And so I thought it was so cool, and I wanted to uphold myself to the same standard. And I decided to go ahead and just go for it at pretty much the end of March. I was like, why not? I can only benefit from this, even though, it is work, breath work, it is challenging, and you're meant to grow from it. So I wanted to just capture on what my takeaways have been after having completed 30 days straight. And also just to have this to look back on to see what I've learned in that process and maybe where I'll be at in the future as I continue to practice breath work and hopefully am committed to it. So what I learned from doing 30 days of breath work, immediately it was to really help me with just grounding and any type of anxiety I was waking up with for whatever the reason. I want to preface this and say that I have meditated consistently for years now, but I felt the same resistance that I had going into breath work as I had when I had initially started meditating. And it was that type of resistance where your higher self and your soul wants you to do it, but it's an ego death, right? There's resistance because you're being held back because that's where the next up level is. And so what I initially learned is that it was really supporting me with my anxiety when I would just wake up and I would just feel a little bit more relaxed and grounded. And I think that within the first, I would say 3 days, but definitely within the first 2 weeks, that was the key theme, was grounding. I would remember completing my breathwork session, and I would practice for anywhere from like 30 to 45 minutes first thing in the morning before I've engaged on technology or on my phone. And you come out of those theta brain states, which naturally happens the more that you progress with your day. And I could quite literally feel like my energy all the way down to my feet, which is not necessarily like the easiest thing for me or the most common, just because grounding is sometimes challenging, especially having so much water in my birth chart. And which, fun fact, guys, that's why I named my business Agua Astrology. It's named after all the water in my chart. So I would just feel as though I was very grounded after those 2 weeks. And I would say that the first actually 3 to 7 days were probably the most challenging. It's almost like going to the gym, right? Like getting there, and then the first couple of days are just the worst. But then once you get past that threshold and that hump, you almost crave it. And I experienced the same sensation with meditation for sure. What I wanted to say is that aside from the grounding, I also felt like there was more energetic space being like almost opened up and created within myself. And there were a lot of emotions that came with it too. I definitely felt as though I was more emotional. I cried more, which isn't really like a thing for me quite often, even though, she's a Cancer sun and you would think that would be the case. But what I really was surprised by was just how much more I was able to process, how much more space I had for other topics throughout my day, whether it was like, heavy readings or heavy topics discussed with my shaman. It just felt like I had more breath for a wide range of responsibilities that come at me on a daily basis. So that was definitely another result. In addition to that, I also felt as though I was more sensitive after, just in general. Like, I've noticed that I can't have as much or drink as much caffeine. And the foods that I'm consuming, I'm also very sensitive to, which has always been the case. But I would notice that past or even towards the end of consuming my first cup of food or coffee after having food, because your blood sugar will spike a little bit more if you have coffee first thing instead of eating first and then having coffee. I was noticing that even after having food and then having my cup of coffee and not even quite finishing my coffee, I was just a little bit more like anxiety ridden. And I think that the only thing that would make sense was actually me completing so much breath work. And I would say I felt that more into week 3. So about 20-ish, 15 to 20-ish days into the month. But I also think that's something else that happened that was really cool when this happened within the second week of breath work was that my cortisol belly, my lower belly, the shape of it, the look of it, it almost felt like it was releasing a little bit, and it looks like it actually firmed up on its own. And I had actually noticed this with my girlfriend Lindsay when she did this last year, that she had experienced the same results. And so that was a little bit of incentive to also practice 30 days of breath work straight. So yeah, it definitely toned up in its own way. And I would attribute breath work to that. It was like a release of some form. And then I would say the last takeaway from breath work is that in the third week, up until this was around day 27, 28, I was very conscious of me almost stepping into higher states of consciousness. And the way that I felt that energy almost build up or stack up within my body that I was highly aware of into that 30-minute session during one of those last few days towards the end of the month, it almost like was like an elevator of sorts, where it was just like a boom, 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 boom stacking of energy within you. You could almost feel yourself lifting and arising to higher states of consciousness. And the feeling that I would maybe describe it as the most similar to would be, if you've ever been under the influence, which I have not, is almost kind of like, maybe being a little bit high. And you feel that way, but you don't have like the hangover effect of it or the after effect of it or the residual, like the post feeling. But you're very aware that you're shifting and you're becoming more conscious versus unconscious, which is what happens as a result of using substances and leaning into forms of addiction like alcohol and so forth. So I definitely think that it's something I would want to continue, and you can only benefit from it, like I said at the beginning of this video. But I do think that my gifts have also heightened and expanded as a result of being consistent with it. So yeah, that's what I have for what I've learned of doing breathwork straight for 30 days. And I hope to see you in the next one.